All right, so this is going to be the first episode of hopefully a continuous thing, barring Adrian's schedule, because you would think the dude is fucking famous with as little time as he can pencil people into his life. Um, but I'm trying to start a new series. I'm gonna probably call it honestly because it's going to be a lot of honest, real, raw conversation, and it might upset some people. It might offend some people. We might offend each other, but I think uh, I think on this first episode we agreed to do sobriety and our coming to terms with sobriety and how we got to the point that we needed our sobriety. And we'll have another person joining us shortly. Um, but I guess we can go ahead and start with some basic stuff. I mean, where are you at in your sobriety?
Um,
Don't come to the table being like, well, technically it's day one again.
no. I'm like, actually, I can tell you where I'm at. 51 days.
Nice, nice.
No booze,
Congrats.
no cocaine. Like completely, like both of them all together.
Nice.
Um, which is like not to say like that's the first time I've ever
Right,
stopped, you know what I mean? But
right.
like this time it definitely feels different, which and even saying that, like you always say that,
Yeah.
each time that you decide, over the years that I've tried to get to this point. But like now is the first time it's been like way easier to like stay out of
Hmm.
situations that would get me, back into using or I like, I've been able to accomplish some goals in terms of like starting a new career and like getting out of retail, which was like a huge kind of huge trigger for
Yeah.
my use as it was. So that kind of coupled with I think just being older and starting to see some of the effects has helped shape this time, make it a little bit different this time.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on there. That's weird. Heidi just disappeared.
It's Zoom.
Yeah, but I don't know why her.
Microsoft's fault.
Yeah, again. Um, well, I think that the you touched on something uh pretty interesting because I definitely find like, I worked in kitchens the majority of my life, and that is a toxic drug den. And also on top of that, the stress that is involved in that, it also adds to that, like the high level of stress of retail, dealing with customers, and then, same thing in the kitchen. You're pumping out all these orders. You get home and you want to relax and you can't force it because you carry your day home. So you turn to something that will ease the pain a little bit. And that's a big thing. Um, that was a big thing for me. It was really hard to work in kitchens at first when I was sober. Um, but that's not to if you can manage your addictions and have fun, then that's one thing. But chances are you're just lying to yourself. I think. I think, like, especially from what I've seen, and this is no shot at anybody specifically, but in Fredericksburg, um, where our stomping grounds are, it was different when you were in college and we would party down there. It was kind of like a weekend thing. We'd get together, party, you'd come up here, party. But after that, when it was like we could do it every night, we did it every night.
Yeah.
And that's where the trouble starts, is when you have that freedom.
And there's no one telling you to like either stop or slow down or like whatever it may be.
Right.
Like, that was like another thing was it was just as long as you're getting your stuff done, then it's okay.
Yeah.
It clearly was not. Like, you
Right.
know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and I think too, like you touching on the point of kitchens, like, because knowing like what Ashley went through, like being an addict myself, but then also like being in a relationship with someone who has similar issues, like kitchens are so gnarly. And I always think people who can stay sober in kitchens are so gnarly because you're literally like anyone can work in a kitchen. So you
Mhm,
have people who are like straight off the street, like you have
mhm,
people who, you know, are in and out of trying to get their life together, people who are just kind of breezing into town, but like, you know, have cooked, you know, a state over,
mhm,
washed dishes a state over, and they all bring all this baggage with them, and you put them in these tiny spaces with
mhm.
sharp objects and turn up the heat,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and then their reward for dealing with all that every day is typically a full bar,
yeah,
uh and the run of a restaurant after hours. So it's, you know, you're just breeding, you know, people who have alcohol issues, and you're breeding people who have mental health issues, not like on purpose by any means, but
right, right.
I think everyone goes into those situations typically younger,
Mhm,
so it takes you much longer to figure out like the habits that you're forming. Because I mean, being 35 now and looking back on like the early years of living in downtown Fredericksburg,
mhm,
like that seems like such a blur to me. Like I can remember like eras, like
mhm. Yeah,
this was the Hanover era and this was this era, but like if you asked me to recall like, you know, what happened summer of this year, like
yeah,
I'd be like, couldn't tell you, because
right.
I'm sure I was boozing and drugging and
Mhm.
just, you know, I can remember big events and kind of things, but the span of time now that I feel like has passed, now
Yeah,
that I've actually slowed down, is has been kind of a tough pill to swallow, like that's for sure.
yeah.
Like, because that's, it seems like such a blur now, and seems like so much time was spent now that I've started to kind of look the other way.
Yeah, and what so the big thing for me was like I was still working at Happy's when I got sober the first time. And I mean, I was at the point at that point I was walking behind the bar and mixing myself drinks and cooking piss drunk. Like I would drink, I would get up from I was living in your living room and I would get up drunk from the night before, go to work, continue drinking, drink after work. It was like I was perpetually
Is every
intoxicated
day, yeah.
with something. And I look back at it now and I go, and I remember at the time when I got sober, the first time I was kind of like, drunk people annoyed me. They upset me because I could see how destructive it was, how they reasoned with themselves and this and that. But then at the same time, I'm back there stressed out, freaking out, and then I walk out front and somebody's got a joint, and I would hit the joint. I'd be like, I need something to chill me out. And I'm not drinking anymore, so let me do this. So it was just trading one for another, one for another,
Oh
one
yeah.
for another. And it got to the point where like I just it didn't happen. And I just went right back to it. And I look back at those times because I mean it started a long time ago. Like yeah, we did that heavily for a while. And when I say a while, I mean years and years.
Dude, a whole
Uh,
lifetime, it seems almost.
yeah,
Like it
yeah. I
almost
mean,
seems like a literal entire lifetime from like when we started hanging and drinking
hmm
to even now.
hmm yeah. And I look back at those times, especially like, UVA when you would come up to Snowden and chill with me and Kenny and those times it was like innocent fun. We still had that high school party mentality where it was just a little bit and then we went back to our lives. And then on the weekends we get together and do it again. But then I look at like Hanover and UVA, like not UVA, but like Hanover and the Happy's time, and I go, God damn, we wasted so much
That
time,
was when it was
money.
worth like every day. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it was easier to take like, you know, we were taking weekends off from drinking versus like drinking on the weekends at
yeah,
that
Yeah. And
Like
we
if you
didn't take
went,
time off.
yeah, if you went like 2, 3 days, like that was sobriety. Like
Yeah.
in a moment like that, and like 2 of those days would have been like a holiday or some shit where you
Mhm.
were you were like out of town or something.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you didn't have the ability to live the life that you'd
Yeah.
normally been living.
Yeah. I remember several times I would, you'd be out of town. You're like, yeah, I can't fuck around. I'm going to see my mom or
Yeah,
something like that. It's like, yeah, I'm right there with you, man. It's Thanksgiving. I got to go do this.
but
And
still
then,
being like so absent from those gatherings because you're still like hungover, and then
yeah,
like you're like withdrawing from the booze and shit like
yeah.
without even realizing it. So you go like hang out with family and you just sit there moody like half the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
Because you
People are
can't.
talking to you, giving them one word
Yeah,
answers and stuff. Like,
you're
how
just
are
sitting.
you? Fine.
Yeah, I have no clue how I am. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
tell you
This
honestly.
is the first time I've been sober enough to realize that I am at
Yeah.
all. So, yeah, I mean, I guess like uh, what was the thing? What was the thing that like triggered what put it in your head that not that you needed to start your road to sobriety, but like where did you start toying with the idea? When was it that you were like, this isn't sustainable at
I
least?
mean, definitely years ago was when that part of the process started, but
Hmm.
like more recently, because like I think there's, and I've been thinking about this like a lot since one of the things I struggled with early on was being like, okay, can I say that, instead of giving it like the sober moniker, because I don't like really that title, I always just say like in recovery, right?
Hmm.
In recovery from drugs and alcohol. And for a long time, I struggled with like having the feeling like mentally that I wanted to like begin this journey to stop,
Hmm.
but like still not being able to for like long enough period of time to even say like I tried. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? So, like when people would ask me like, "Oh, like do you drink or like do you do drugs or whatever?" And it's like, "Yeah, but I'm in recovery." But then, 5 minutes later you're taking a shot or like doing a bump.
Hmm.
So, it's and I think a lot of that too is where Fredericksburg gets its like just nonchalantness about when someone says no, like I'm trying not to drink. That's why people just don't really take it seriously. Because in the same breath, someone will tell you, like, yo, I haven't drank for 2 or 3 days. And that's like supposed to be a feat. Like that's supposed to be a big deal. And in other circles, I guess I wouldn't know because I run in these same circles. Like in other circles, I guess that would seem like preposterous that you would you would hold up your little 2 or 3 days of not drinking and think that that was something that was sufficient because most people don't drink the
Well,
way
I think that when you're drowning, a gasp of air is something to be proud of.
that's true.
And I'm not going to say we were drowning necessarily, but we were drowning. And it like, I know for me, especially, one of the big things for me was like, how am I going to? Drinking was our entire, or for me, it was my entire social life. Like
100%.
everybody I knew drank. There was nobody that I didn't know that drank, drug, something. And that was the only time I saw them, which, and then I'm like, well, how do I remove this entire chunk of my life because of, sobriety? So that caused me to stumble a lot because I didn't want the fun to end. I thought that like when I started to try to recover, it would just be boring and I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And that scared me because
Yeah, that's super scary. That's
it
a hard. All right.
yeah, it's a very shallow thing. Like drinking is very surface. Like yeah, you can have deep conversations, yeah, you can have this and that. But like in reality, you're not working towards anything, you're escaping from
Yeah,
something.
100%.
So now that I can't escape anymore, I've got to deal with my problems. I've got to deal with my mental issues. I've got to deal with my, self-confidence, my self-worth, all these things. And it scared me out of recovery numerous times because I was like, who else am I? What else am I outside
Yeah.
of this guy?
Like it's way easier to keep the party going than it is to face that bell of sobriety because like
Yeah.
understanding like what you mean about the time I think is a huge thing because now that I spend the time is so flipped, of when I'm allowing myself to like what I consider hanging out now. But I realized that before, like I was literally living my life to get back to the point to where I could be partying again. So like
Hmm.
it was literally like just get through the workday enough so that you could get back to drinking. Or like if you have a day off, like get up and get all your shit done
Hmm.
like before noon. So
Yeah.
like and start drinking by like 1 or like
That,
whatever it
I
is.
mean, that's kind of what we used to. Let's just take a break and hello,
Bring me in
Heidi.
there, Heidi.
Yeah, how are you? We got started a little early because Adrian's pompous and he can only give us an hour.
Come
So,
on, man. Like
um,
I've got things going on.
anyways, so we kind of jumped in already, but we'll give you a chance to kind of go over some things. Like we talked about so far, we've talked about our like when we realized that it was necessary to start our recoveries. If you want to speak on that.
Um, yeah, I realized it was necessary the day after my 23rd birthday, and I woke up in my bed with a knife next to my face because I tried to kill myself on my birthday.
Yeah, that's
Whoops.
terrible.
Did I overshare? I don't know.
No,
No, no, no, no. We've been sharing.
Okay.
We didn't get to our recoveries quite like that,
haven't
but
gotten to the dark times yet.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, were there times before that you thought like maybe this isn't sustainable before you got to that point?
Um, yeah. Yeah, they're definitely like in the months leading up to that, I was like, wow, this is the craziest thing. Like I tell myself I'm not gonna drink tonight or I'm not gonna do this tonight, one beer tonight, and I can't seem to like
Yeah.
not go through with that. So I remember feeling like, wow, I really like I want to stop, but like I just can't, and this is hopeless. And I was doing a whole bunch of crazy shit before that. Like I got a DUI, I hit a house with my car and totaled my car, and that shit, I was just like, this is just bad luck. I'm young. I'm supposed to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But then like after that I was like, wow, yeah, maybe nothing bad was really happening at that point. So,
Yeah, it sounds like, you know, everybody, we all have reasoned with ourselves before. Heidi, let me ask you, can you put the microphone in the same room with you? You
It's
sound
on a
like,
stand.
yeah, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Can you hear
Uh,
me now?
yeah,
You
Okay,
have to
great.
see it in like it gets better when you see it in the frame.
yeah. You
Okay,
got to be
cool.
professional.
Then people know you're on a podcast. You could just be a
Yeah,
schlub like me and use your computer audio.
yeah, yeah. I sent her like a bunch of old stuff that I had, so it's not high quality by any means. It's like very, very ghetto rigged together, but
Job done.
yeah, so I think that you're just gonna hold it now. All right.
Yeah, there's nothing else I can set it on.
That's awesome. Um so yeah, I think that a big thing is like you recognize it and then you go, okay, yeah, tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. And tomorrow never seems to come until you get to a point where you're like, this can't keep on. whether it's forced on you or you make the choice yourself. And it's a big step. And we were just talking about the thing that was like kind of keeping me from it was I didn't know how to self-identify outside of drinking because it was my and doing drugs because it was my entire social life, and I didn't know what to do with myself or how to deal with my issues without that because I had leaned on it so much, to kind of escape from them. So somebody else talk now.
I'm still going through that like hard though. Like the whole I'm not funny now. I'm not like interesting. And
You
like
were never funny, don't worry.
thank you.
Oh my God.
The biggest area is like with like shooting photos because like my entire photographic identity has become like these spaces.
Mhm.
And so like I've even since gone back like in the last 2 weeks, like I've tried to go out like just on my own and like drink water, and I can't stay out, like I can't stand it to stay out late enough to get to the point where I could even like begin to think about like wanting to take photos. And
Is that because your photography is like a big part of it? You do portraits and stuff, but a lot of it is the partying scene
yeah,
in
so like,
Fredericksburg.
and so for me it's been like this thing of like, well, am I creative at all, or was I just really drunk for like a decade like
Yeah.
taking photos,
Yeah.
because, like even like portrait shoot, like I was drinking most times.
Mhm.
Like you talk about earlier about being like I'll start tomorrow, like I'll start next week or whatever it is, and like thinking that and hearing other people say that, I distinctly remember one time being like, well, I'm no longer like being like I'm gonna stop tomorrow. I'm being like, well, I can't stop because like this and this is coming up, so
Mhm.
like I can't be sober for that. Like
Right.
it would be anything. Like it would be everything from like a holiday that's coming up.
Mhm.
New fucking flash. There's holidays in every single month.
Yeah.
Or like just something that I didn't want to do. Like, oh, I have a really hard day coming up at work, like because we're going through this month. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna want to try to start to be sober then. So like coming up with ideas to continue
Mhm.
versus just being like, no, I'm picking this day and this is going to be the day that I'm going to give it up.
That's an interesting point because I don't have like a art medium like you do, but I do draw and I do sketch and I do paint things. And that was another thing when I especially when I stopped smoking weed was it was big for me because I was like, well, now I'm not going to be able to be creative, or something will have changed and I'm not going to be able to do it anymore. And to be fair, I haven't really picked up any art recently, but I go through phases, and I'd like to think that that's just all that is. I wonder if that's something. You're also an artist, Heidi. What do you think? Did that cross
Um,
your mind?
oh, it definitely crossed my mind, especially when I quit smoking weed.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had periods like the first time I got like, fully sober, was without weed or whatever. I was like, I was on one. I was doing really good. Was like doing some art shows or whatever. But then after that, I just like fell flat on my ass.
Hmm.
And this time, like this is the longest period I've been sober for. I still have a hard fucking time with it. And that's also because I'm like struggling with the fact that like the most like almost all of my energy is like being put towards my survival with my fucking job.
Hmm.
So by the time I come home, I want to work on what I'm actually passionate about, but I don't have a lot of energy left for
Hmm.
that. That's what I'm telling myself anyways. But yeah, before that, I felt like a huge fucking imposter. I was like, I can't do this without weed. I can't do this without cocaine. This fucking sucks. But then I realized I was like, why don't I like stop trying to commodify what I'm doing? You know, I don't know. I just this whole like weird thing with like social media now where it's like everything has to be like perfectly put together. you know, you have to make like reels and shit, and they have to be like fucking directed by fucking Spielberg to like be really good and all this shit. So I don't know. I'm struggling with all that right now as far as art's concerned.
I think I gave up, like, was definitely giving up social media before all this, but like,
Mhm.
it's become so much easier, definitely after the fact. And
Yeah.
like, with both of you quitting weed as well, like, I have not, right?
Right.
So I definitely, my path was like, all right, like, I'm definitely more like the California sober route, but
Mhm.
on the flip side of that coin,
Oh, that's cool. They made up a term so you don't
Yeah,
have to like
you
say
made up a
that you're
term for it,
okay,
but
cool.
it's so ridiculous,
Yeah,
right?
that's fucking cute.
It's term for everything. But like, I even struggle with that, but still, and like, reason, like we were talking about it earlier, how I was like, how does this time feel different, right?
Mhm.
I've even re-examined my relationship with weed. So like, weed is no longer like an everyday thing. Like, you know what I mean? I don't want it to be an every night thing to get used to like having something at the end of every day.
Mhm.
And like now, whereas before it would be like, all right, like day off, like wake up, hit a couple bong rips, like get the day rolling, whatever. Like now it's like, no, like I have art shit I want to work on. Like, let me do all that stuff first, and then maybe later I'll see if I feel like it. You know, we'll smoke and go out or something like that, or smoke and I'll order some food. But now it's definitely a more conscious decision because like I do understand that even that like has its effects and has its pitfalls, and
Mhm.
like wanting to, if I'm going to continue to smoke weed, you know, on a regular weekly basis, being like, okay, like the quality of that weed needs to be to a certain point, because there's no reason now that I should be getting, you know, a bunch of weed that I don't know where it comes from, or you know, you can tailor fit your dosages to what you want so that you can either be more productive, or it can help you sleep, or it can help you eat. So I think even examining the rest of the drug, like my relationship to drugs and alcohol in my life, has like even made me question like everything down to weed and like sugar, or you know, do I spend too much time playing video games? It's understanding now that there needs to be more of a balance, because for so long it was, things were just skewed on pleasure. Like like it was, everything was tipped towards like the pleasure side of the scale for way too long.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that you know, the adjustment period, and you're right about you start looking at every aspect in a way of like, is there is this a necessity? Am I in, you mentioned sugar, like am I taking in too much sugar? Am I doing this too much? Am I doing that too much? Like you start looking at that in every aspect of your life, and then you start to see, I guess maybe because you're starting to wire your brain like, I don't need this, this is a problem. What are other problems in my life? Where else can I turn this and it can be helpful for, you know, every part of my life? And I think that that's a positive, but also like, you know, I've been smoking since I was 10. So like I need to quit that. But I've got a tight grip. Like I cannot do that right now. Like and I don't know that I ever will, but it's one thing that, you know, when I thought, you know, I thought when I started this, I was going to be like, all right, I'm gonna stop doing this, I'm gonna stop doing this, and then I'm gonna get rid of the cigarettes, and then I'll be good to go. And it's just like, you know, I try to like, all right, Rome wasn't built in a day, but also they eventually finished that motherfucker. So got to get around to that part too. So but you know, I'm not there yet. And it's still like an addict's mentality, like, well, I quit all this other stuff. You know, you reason with yourself like, well, I quit all this, like I'll keep this for right now until I'm comfortable enough, and then I'll get rid of this too. I'm sure that's kind of
Oh yeah.
where you're at with weed. And honestly, like, I know technically it doesn't, you know, weed doesn't count as recovery, but like you made up a term for it like that. Out of on the grand scheme of things, that is not, like, I would even still consider that in recovery, like,
And
to
no,
me.
and 100%, like that's part of it. I think the thing too is like, in all of this, like, I think one of the biggest things that I've found is that the reason why I started using recovery instead of sobriety is because, like, it's everything. Like, it could be like you shop too fucking much. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could be in recovery from shopping.
Mhm.
So that's, to me, is like one of the biggest things. And two, like, what a feeling that we're all describing, and I think needs to be brought like way more to the forefront of people who are looking to like abstain from certain things in their life, is like, you never hear the stories about how like a lot of times this is just average, like, because you kind of touched on this, like, you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna quit this and this, and then I'm gonna be good. Like, there's no like I'm good at the end of it. Like, there's no like, you know, when you hear the stories of addicts, they're like, and then I started a fucking business, and like, you know, I have this huge thing now that takes up all this time. But you never hear about the people where it's like, no, you know, life got marginally better. Like, I had to deal with things like way differently, and things sucked actually a lot more when they happened to me, because I didn't have those crutches for a long time. So I think normalizing the fact that like you're not just gonna wake up one day and be like, ha, I did it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be living with this shit for the rest of my life. Like 100%. Like, I could go 30 years and then all of a sudden do a fat line at a bar one day, and I just spiral right back down to where I was, you know.
Yeah, that's a tough realization. And you know, another point to that is like, we started to touch on this before Heidi joined, is like the dealing with yourself and learning how to deal with things without those crutches. And it's like, another thing that they don't really talk about is like, it's going to suck. Like, life is going to suck. Like, you have to be okay with boredom, not knowing what to do with yourself, and your anxiety. And if any of those things are what drove you to that, then you're going to have to work on that really hard along with your recovery. Because I mean, let me tell you, I sit in this exact room that I'm in right now all the time, because there's not that, like, there's not, like, if I leave and I go downtown, there's a possibility I'm going to drink or do something else. Like, you have to find other things that take up your time. So with us, luckily, I have this, you have photography, you have your art. Like, there's things that we can focus on and put that energy to. But for people, like, life's going to be boring and it's going to suck, but you might live longer in that suck. But
Steeped in the suck.
yeah, but I think it's something that people need to know. I thought like, oh, everything's going to be grand, and you know, it's not. It's kind of shitty, to be honest, but it in the long run, it's worth it, I think.
Heidi, how long have you been on the sober train? It's been like over a year, right?
Yeah, it's been 2 years and 4 months.
Fucking hell. And Jake, you?
I mean, I can say like it's been about a year
Right.
since I drank last. So
varying, yeah, we have varying levels of when we've started.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
the thing of it,
go
sorry,
ahead. No, you go
the
ahead.
thing of it is that recovery isn't like linear, and recovery, like well, like you already touched on, it's like there's harm reduction, you know. Like, I was definitely smoking weed for a minute, and that was fine because it was better than other alternatives that I would lean towards too. Like, recovery isn't linear, and if you fuck up, then it doesn't like take away all the other shit that you just did for your recovery prior, you know what I mean? Yeah.
That's a tough lesson to learn at the beginning too, because like some spirals have happened long before getting to this moment where like you make it 2 or 3 weeks, and then like you just get knocked off, and then it goes for days and days and days. Like 3 times as hard, because you're not only dealing with whatever got you there, but you're dealing with the fact that you let yourself down. And the only way to like you just double down, because you're like, well, I already, you know, fucked it up, so like might as well like go dive into it even harder and you know, go as hard because I'm probably gonna want to stop again. Like, but those vicious cycles are just so rough, I think.
Yeah, the shame
Um,
spiral is what I like to call it.
Yes.
Yeah. We got a minute left in this meeting, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it, and I'll send you an invite, and you click, Adrian, click the invite again in like, I don't know, 30 seconds or whatever.
Zoom is weird.
Yeah. Well, I ain't paying for this shit.
That makes sense. You could also like, this is where you can put your commercials and stuff.
Nobody watches this. We're not monetized. We don't
You
get commercials.
never know. One day you'll get sponsored.
Yeah, okay. All right.